the black sheep of a high-ranking noble family. The man who ruled Sylvania Academy like a king. Ed Rothstaler. A name feared, hated, and whispered behind closed doors. He abused his authority, insulted students without restraint, and even dared to use foul language in the presence of the Honorable Princess Penia herself. Worse still, he tampered with the Academy's sacred entrance examination out of petty jealousy and arrogance. For the prestigious Rothstaler family, it was the final disgrace they could no longer tolerate. And so, without hesitation, they disowned him. His dormitory was stripped away. His possessions were thrown out like garbage. His status vanished overnight. Students watched from a distance as he walked through the academy grounds carrying the remnants of his life. Look, isn't that Ed Rothstaler? Don't stare. He might notice. Who cares anymore? He got kicked out of the dormitory. I heard he tampered with the entrance exams. Serves that dirty noble bastard right. Ed listened silently as the voices followed him like shadows. But there was one problem. The arrogant Ed Rothstaler they hated was no longer him. Because inside that body was someone else entirely. Someone who had awakened in a world he recognized all too well. A world from a game. Sylvania's failed swordmaster. His favorite game. He had played through it 5 times, memorized its roots, its characters, its hidden events. Normally, people transported into games became heroes, prodigies, legendary hunters, or heirs blessed with overwhelming power. But fate had mocked him. Instead of the protagonist, he had become a third-rate villain with barely any screen time. A pathetic noble who appeared only at the beginning of the story before disappearing into ruin. And worst of all, he had arrived at the exact moment Ed Rothstaler's life collapsed. Strength, 3. Intelligence, 4. Dexterity, 7. Willpower, 7. Even ordinary farmers had better stats. Ed was supposed to belong to the magic department, yet his intelligence was laughably low. His strength was pitiful even by noble standards. In the original game, he existed only to be hated before fading into irrelevance. Then he remembered something else. At the very end credits of the game, Ed Rothstaler appeared one final time. As a beggar starving in the streets. A useless rich boy abandoned by his family with no skills to survive. It had been a miracle he lived that long. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Why had he become this character? There was no answer. But one thing was certain. He refused to accept that ending. If survival was the only path left to him, then he would survive no matter what. Sylvania Academy stretched across the entirety of Akan Island, more like a city than a school. Far to the northeast, hidden beyond the main grounds, lay an undeveloped forest untouched by most students. That was where Ed wandered. He spent half a day walking simply to escape the contemptuous gazes of others. By the time he stopped, reality had finally settled in. This was the beginning of the game. Fortunately, although Ed had been disowned, he had not yet been expelled from Sylvania Academy. That alone changed everything. Because in this world, graduating from Sylvania guaranteed a future of wealth, influence, and opportunity. And since the story itself took place inside the academy, he could use the knowledge from his previous life to survive. As long as he graduated. That became his goal. But first, there were more immediate problems. Food. Clothing. Shelter. The basics of survival. The few belongings he carried would last perhaps a week at most. After that, he would have nothing. Finding work would be difficult. Ed's reputation was infamous throughout the academy, and returning to the dormitories was impossible. At least there was a stream nearby. That was enough to start. Using the little magic he possessed, Ed began constructing a crude shelter deep within the forest. Yet every spell exhausted him far more than expected. Magic consumed stamina. And hunger came quickly. They could have at least fed me before throwing me out. Days passed. His shelter slowly took shape, a miserable hut barely fit to protect him from the rain. But it was still something. He endured starvation, exhaustion, and isolation. 2 weeks remained before classes began. If he could survive until then, he might still have a chance. A scholarship. A future. A different ending. For the first time since awakening in this world, hope began to appear. And then, Ed Rothstaler? A familiar voice called out from behind him. Ed froze. Only then did he remember something important. The main characters of the game were here too. And standing before him was the very person responsible for driving Ed Rothstaler out of the dormitory in the first place. Ed Rothstaler. A villain introduced right at the start of the game. A spoiled noble who abused his status to harass Ayla. the protagonist's childhood friend. But his actions immediately backfired. Unable to accept humiliation, Ed tried to take revenge. By secretly tampering with the protagonist's entrance exam to stop him from entering Sylvania Academy. But he got caught. And the one who exposed him was someone hiding her identity during the exam itself. Princess Peenia Elias Crowell, the third princess of the Crowell Empire. Princess Peenia activated her unique ability, insightful eyes, an ability capable of seeing through lies and deception. Ed Ruffstaler desperately claimed he was innocent. But Peenia saw through every word. As punishment, he was thrown out of the dormitories. Everyone in the academy hated him. And then, Peenia encountered him again. "What are you doing here?" For Ed, this was the worst possible person to meet right now. "Have you not been expelled yet?" Ed explained that he was technically still a student, even though he had been kicked out of the dorms. But Peenia wasn't interested in excuses. "Get out. I cannot stand seeing someone as despicable as you anywhere near this academy." She even threatened to speak to the headmaster personally and have him expelled forever. Meanwhile, the fish Ed had spent 3 days trying to catch was burning to ashes over the fire. His food was ruined. And now, his future was in danger too. Because Princess Peenia truly had the authority to destroy his life. As the sun began to set over the forest, Ed noticed something strange. Why was a princess wandering alone in such a dangerous place, without guards? Then he realized the truth. Peenia was currently taking Professor Glass's class assignment examination. A brutal test where students searched the forest for hidden magic marbles. Only the best students could reach Class A. Ed revealed a secret location. Deep within the southeastern lake stood a tiny island. And at the center of that island, the guardian tree of Marilda. "There, you will find my gift." Peenia didn't trust him. Just days ago, Ed Ruffstaler was a lying cheater. But this version of Ed felt different. Still, she followed his directions. And there, hidden beneath the guardian tree, was the golden marble. The very item capable of securing Class A. Professor Glass later revealed the truth behind the exam. This test wasn't simply about finding marbles. The true challenge was understanding the examiner's intention. Only students who located marbles while using very little mana would qualify for Class A. And only 3 people succeeded. Ziggs, Lortel, and the student who discovered the marble hidden beneath the guardian tree of Marilda. Princess Peenia Elias Crowell, top of the class. Meanwhile, Ed sat alone in the forest, staring at another completely burnt fish. Starving, cold, exhausted, but alive. Because unlike the rest of House Ruffstaler, Ed had already been disowned. His former family was infamous for abusing power and conducting forbidden human experiments in pursuit of immortality. Eventually, every member of House Ruffstaler would either be executed or imprisoned. But Ed escaped that fate. Still, he now faced a new problem. By helping Peenia succeed, he had accidentally changed the original storyline of the game. In the original plot, Peenia was supposed to fail the assignment exam and be placed into Class F. That crushing defeat would later shape her into the beloved Princess of Benevolence. But now, everything had changed. Or so Ed thought. Because Peenia never intended to take the golden marble for herself. She hid her royal identity during the exam because she wanted to earn success through her own merit. And the marble? She didn't truly find it herself. So despite discovering the answer, she refused to claim it. Peenia's strength was never just talent or intelligence. It was her integrity. And for the first time, even her insightful eyes couldn't understand Ed Ruffstaler anymore. Because he had spoken the truth. From that day onward, Princess Peenia began keeping a close eye on him. Eventually, Ed returned to Sylvania Academy. Students whispered behind his back. How dare he show his face here? He's still attending classes. But Ed no longer cared about status, power, or revenge. He only had one goal now. To survive. To graduate. And somehow, change the terrible future waiting for him. Because to everyone else, Ed Ruffstaler was still a villain. But little by little, people started realizing something strange. It's like he's become a completely different person. The opening ceremony of Sylvania Academy marked the beginning of a new semester. Banners swayed gently beneath the spring wind while students filled the grand courtyard with chatter and laughter. The stone pathways of the academy, silent during the break, had come alive once more with footsteps and excitement. Professors stood near the central stage, exchanging greetings with returning students, while the members of the Sylvania Alumni Association prepared the ceremonial events. For everyone else, it was the beginning of a bright new chapter. For Ed Ruffstaler, it was the beginning of survival. Ed stood near the back of the crowd with his hands buried in his pockets, trying his best not to draw attention. The applause of the students echoed through the academy grounds, but his thoughts were elsewhere. 3 days ago, he had nearly been expelled. The memory still lingered unpleasantly in his mind. I didn't expect Penia to report me to the dean. Yet strangely enough, the old dean had worn a satisfied smile the entire time. Whatever Penia had told him, it clearly wasn't enough to destroy Ed's standing completely. Still, the warning had been clear. One wrong move and he would be thrown out of the academy. And that could never happen. Because Ed knew something nobody else did. This world was the setting of a game. And if the original plot changed too much, his knowledge of the future would become useless. I need to be careful, Ed muttered beneath his breath. I can't stray from the game's storyline. That evening, Ed sat alone near his shabby shelter deep within the northern forest beyond the academy grounds. A small blue window shimmered before his eyes. Combat skill details. Rank combat beginner. Specialty bow proficiency. Level 1. The faint glow reflected in his tired eyes. Unlike the noble students attending Sylvania, Ed had no talent with swords, no inherited magical lineage, and certainly no wealth. What he did have was experience surviving. Life skills. Foraging. Hunting. Crafting. Trapping. And above all, the bow. The bow works best for me, he thought while sharpening a crude arrowhead against stone. It suited both survival and magic. If he could improve his crafting skills enough to create high-quality arrows, then eventually he could imbue them with mana or elemental effects. At least, that was the plan. The problem was that Ed himself possessed almost no elemental affinity. Fire, ice, wind, lightning. None of them came naturally to him. Which meant he would need another way to survive the disasters waiting ahead. Ah. So you're Ed Ruffstaler. A cheerful voice suddenly echoed through the trees. Ed froze. A girl with long pink hair stepped lightly through the forest clearing as if she belonged there more than the animals did. Tiny particles of mana drifted around her like glowing fireflies. The moment Ed recognized her face, his stomach sank. Yennecar Pale Rover. The top student of the second-year magic department. A genius elemental mage. And one of the most important characters in the entire game. Yennecar smiled brightly and approached without hesitation. I'm Yennecar Pale Rover. Marilda told me about you. Marilda? The high-ranking spirit protecting this forest, she answered casually. She said an interesting human suddenly appeared here. Ed immediately felt nervous. Spirits. Of course. Yennecar was famous for her extraordinary compatibility with elemental spirits. She could communicate with beings invisible to ordinary humans. To spirits, this forest was sacred ground. And Ed had been cutting trees, hunting wildlife, and living here illegally for weeks. An unwelcome guest indeed. Seeing his awkward expression, Yennecar laughed softly. Don't worry. Spirits understand the circle of life. Hunting and survival don't bother them. As she spoke, she gently raised both hands. Look. A tiny glowing creature floated above her palms like a ball of light wrapped in fur. She's adorable, right? I formed a contract with her yesterday. Ed stared blankly. I can't see anything. Yennecar blinked. You can't see spirits? No. For a brief moment, genuine surprise crossed her face. Then curiosity. Ed immediately understood the danger. This was bad. Very bad. If he became involved with Yennecar now, he would inevitably become entangled in the game's main storyline. And Yennecar's future was catastrophic. He needed distance. Immediately. Well, I should get going, Ed said quickly while turning away. I need to forge before sunset. He didn't wait for her response. As he walked deeper into the woods, he could still hear Yennecar softly speaking to the invisible spirit beside her. He really couldn't see you. Then, after a pause. What an interesting person. Life after classes was exhausting. Every morning, Ed woke before dawn and sprinted across the forest just to arrive at lectures on time. He borrowed textbooks from the academy library because he couldn't afford his own. He scratched notes onto flattened stone slabs using burnt wooden sticks because paper was expensive. After classes, he washed his sweat-stained uniform in the river and prayed it would dry before morning. Then came hunting. Collecting firewood. Gathering drinking water. Preparing jerky for lunch the next day. By the time everything was finished, he barely managed 4 hours of sleep. It was miserable. But survivable. And survival was all Ed needed. At least, until one particular problem refused to leave him alone. Ed suddenly stopped walking through the forest one evening. "How long are you going to keep following me?" A startled yelp came from behind a tree. "What? You knew?" Yenneker awkwardly stepped out from hiding. Ed sighed deeply. "You were being obvious. But I wanted to know more about you." "Why?" "Because everyone says terrible things about you," she admitted honestly. "But I don't know you personally yet." Ed stared at her silently. That was exactly the kind of person Yenneker was. Gentle. Open-hearted. Dangerously sincere. And because Ed knew her future, he couldn't simply ignore her kindness. In the original story, Yenneker eventually became the final boss of Act 1. The cheerful girl standing before him would one day collapse under overwhelming despair. And among everyone at the academy, she was the only person who genuinely smiled at Ed Rothstaler. That made things difficult. Very difficult. So Ed chose the cruelest option available. "Yenneker," he said carefully. "Can I ask you for a favor?" Her eyes brightened instantly. "A favor?" "As you can see, I'm broke. Completely broke. Since I was disowned, I've been desperate lately." He hesitated intentionally before continuing. "So, could you lend me some money?" Silence. Yenneker froze. Money. That single word struck directly at her weakness. Though she was a top student with a full scholarship, Yenneker came from a poor farming family. Without scholarship support, she never could have entered Sylvania Academy in the first place. Her expression slowly crumbled. "How much?" Ed almost felt guilty seeing her reaction. Almost. Because if she disliked him now, she would eventually leave him alone. And that was safer for both of them. 3 days later, Yenneker Pale Rover disappeared entirely from his life. Ed finally relaxed. A little cruel, he admitted to himself while stacking firewood beside his shelter, but this way I won't get dragged into the plot. Then, crunch. A branch snapped nearby. Ed immediately turned around. What the? Someone was sleeping in his shelter. Silver hair. Tiny frame. Expressionless face. The moment Ed recognized her, every nerve in his body went cold. Lucy Mayriel. The strongest student in Sylvania Academy. A legendary prodigy. Feared by professors and nobles alike. And far more dangerous than Yenneker. Why is she here? Ed thought frantically. Lucy slowly opened one eye. Her voice was flat and sleepy. It's noisy. I didn't even say anything. Not you. Lucy lazily pointed behind him. That huge wolf keeps talking to you but Ed can't see anything. Marilda. The high-ranking spirit guardian of the forest. Lucy rubbed her eyes and yawned. It keeps asking you. To save Yenneker in the future. The night suddenly felt far colder than before. A strange wolf spirit stood behind Ed. Only Lucy could hear it speaking. Save Yenneker in the future. Ed looked confused. You say that, but I don't see anything. More importantly, Ed had a much bigger problem. He thought he had finally managed to get Yenneker off his back. But now things were somehow getting even worse. Why was Lucy sleeping inside his shelter? Thanks to her tiny stature and her ability to walk through the air like a floating cat, Lucy could go anywhere she wanted. Clock towers. Rooftops. Hidden corners. And now, Ed's campsite deep inside the northern forest of Akan Island. The cool breeze, the nearby stream, the peaceful atmosphere. To Lucy, it was the perfect place to skip class and take naps. The next day, Ed realized just how dangerous this situation actually was. Lucy had casually flown across the island while half asleep, while casting multiple high-level spells at the same time. If someone this absurd kept hanging around his camp, the original story of the game might completely fall apart. So Ed tried preparing for survival instead. Construction completed. Crafting skill increased. New crafted item, snare trap. A simple trap made from rope and a bent branch, capable of catching small animals. But before he could even relax, Lucy stole some of his jerky. Ooh, what an interesting taste. She didn't listen to anything he said. And since she had already visited his camp multiple times, it was obvious she would keep coming back. Ed desperately tried remembering information from the game guides. Every single one of them agreed on one thing. There was absolutely no way to defeat Lucy Mayriel. However, Ed suddenly remembered a tiny detail most players ignored. Every single day, the maids from Arflis Hall chased Lucy around the academy, and Lucy always ran away from them. So when Ed casually mentioned that the maids were currently searching for her, Lucy immediately panicked. I just remembered something urgent. And just like that, Lucy Mayriel disappeared. Ed thought the problem was solved. Lucy had only stayed at his camp for 2 days. Surely that wouldn't affect the story. But he quickly realized. He had become far too complacent. Soon after, the academy began its joint combat training. A tournament made up of one-on-one mock battles between students from every department. Combat students used practice weapons. Magic students were restricted to basic spells. Alchemy students were forbidden from using powerful potions. And every important character in the story participated. Princess Peenia. Lortel, the Golden Daughter. Ziggs, the Spear from Nature. Yenneker, the Elementalist. And of course, the protagonist himself. Talie McLaw, the failed swordsman. Ed wasn't interested in most of the matches. He already knew how the story would end. But suddenly, he remembered something horrifying. In the original timeline, Ed Ruffstaler had already been expelled by now. Which meant he had no idea who his own opponent would be. Then he saw the bracket. Peenia Elias Crowell. Ed's opponent was the princess herself. At the same time, another announcement echoed through the arena. Lucy Mayriel and Talie McLaw, please proceed to the stage. Ed immediately focused on Talie. He had replayed this game countless times. He had seen every bad ending, every heartbreaking route, and the true ending as well. Not a single path had ever been easy. So even if Ed only wanted to protect himself now, he still found himself cheering for Talie. Because this duel was supposed to become the beginning of Talie's legend. But there was one problem. Lucy was missing. Everyone panicked. If the duel didn't happen, the future itself could change. Then suddenly, Lucy appeared beside Ed. I'm hungry, do you have any more of that jerky? Go do your duel first. Finally, the match began. Top first-year student Lucy Mayriel versus Talie McLaw, the future swordmaster. A boy who had never even properly held a sword before. Yet somehow, Talie managed to cut through Lucy's lightning-fast magic. For the first time, Lucy looked surprised. Talie closed the distance. And just as the story should have gone, Lucy accidentally cast an intermediate-level lightning spell. In the original game, that mistake caused her disqualification, and made Talie the first person to ever defeat Lucy Mayriel. It was the moment that inspired him to walk the path of the Swordmaster. Ed watched excitedly. This is it. But then, something felt wrong. That wasn't lightning magic. It was wind magic. The winner is Lucy Mayriel. Talie lost. And in that moment, Ed realized the story had already begun changing. The winner is Lucy Mayriel. Talie lost. The spark in Talie's eyes vanished instantly. An overwhelming difference in power could crush someone's spirit in a single moment. Yikes, this could be really bad. Leaving him alone right now was the worst possible option. Ed immediately realized what had changed. In the original story, Lucy and the Great Spirit Marilda were never supposed to meet. But after Lucy stayed at Ed's camp, the storm's blessing had already begun changing the future. Lucy had become even stronger. Next up are Ed Ruffstaler and Princess Peenia Elias Crowell. But Ed barely cared about the duel. Talie should have won. This battle was supposed to inspire Talie to pick up the sword and gain confidence. Instead, everything had gone wrong because Ed Ruffstaler still existed within the academy. Ed quickly chased after Talie. Hey, Talie. I don't know if this will help, but it's better than nothing. Your efforts will definitely bear fruit. Don't beat yourself up over this. You just had bad luck with the bracket. There are way too many ridiculous trials waiting at this academy. So don't despair over something this small. Ed desperately tried encouraging him. Because if Talie truly fell into despair here, then Ed himself might end up facing a doomed future instead. Meanwhile, Princess Peenia quietly watched him. Everyone around her mocked Ed. He's just pretending to be nice. He used to bully Talie. He's obviously hiding some selfish motive. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Ed Ruffstaler truly had been a terrible person. A noble who abused his status. Someone who tampered with entrance exams and humiliated weaker students. At least, that was who he used to be. But when Peenia remembered the desperation in Ed's voice while cheering for Talie, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Now then, begin the duel. Peenia attacked immediately. Water magic surged toward Ed. But I've lost. Ed simply stepped aside and allowed himself to be hit directly. The audience burst into laughter. He went down in one blow. That was even worse than Taylor. But Penia froze. From the moment he stepped onto the stage, Ed Ruffstaler never once looked her in the eyes. The winner is Princess Penia Elias Kroll. So he never intended to fight seriously at all. After the duel, Penia stopped him outside. "What's wrong with you? You never intended to fight me properly. All you wanted was to leave the stage as quickly as possible." Overwhelmed by academy duties, politics, professors, and imperial pressure, Penia finally snapped. Ed quietly listened. Then calmly spoke. "Princess, calm down. Take a breath. Breathe in, and breathe out." Penia suddenly realized how agitated she had become. "You're right, this is a bad habit of mine." Growing up within the imperial palace had forced her to constantly doubt everyone's intentions. So she asked him directly. "You tried to get disowned by your family because you knew about the dark side of House Ruffstaler, didn't you?" "That's a sharp deduction. Half of it is wrong." Ed admitted there truly was darkness within House Ruffstaler. But he refused to explain further. Then Penia asked the question bothering her most. "Why did you encourage Taylor earlier? Why would you cheer for someone you tried to destroy?" Those were very good questions. But Ed couldn't tell her the truth. Because the only advantage he had in this world was his knowledge of the story. So instead, he lied. "I just wanted people to see me differently." Insightful eyes activated instantly. "Lie. It's true though." "Lie. Really, I swear." "Lie." Penia had no proof. But she knew he was hiding something. Finally, she sighed. "You may leave." As Ed walked away, Penia quietly stared at him. Her entire life had been spent seeing through lies. But this was the first time. Someone had seen through her own facade instead. "You seem exhausted, princess. This isn't the imperial court. It's Sylvania Academy." Those simple words struck deeper than she expected. But Ed had no time to think about that now. If Taylor gave up here, then both his peaceful future, and perhaps even the world itself, could collapse. Taylor? But before Ed could continue searching, "Don't come any closer." Ayla Triss stood in front of Taylor protectively, main heroine of the story, and someone who still hated Ed Ruffstaler completely. "Stop bullying Taylor already." If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. See you in the next video. "You've bullied him more than enough already." Ayla Triss stood protectively in front of Taylor. Even now, she still completely hated Ed Ruffstaler. But Ed wasn't worried anymore. As long as Taylor had Ayla beside him, the protagonist would always stand back up again. That unbreakable fighting spirit in Taylor's eyes. The refusal to give up no matter how overwhelming the opponent. Ed had witnessed it countless times while playing through the game. And strangely, seeing Taylor recover made him genuinely relieved. Not because the original story was correcting itself, but because someone he had spent so much time with was doing okay. That alone was enough for him. Soon after, another major duel began. Lortel Keyhelland, the Golden Daughter, versus Yennecar Pale Rover, the Elementalist. Ed quietly watched from afar. "Take a good look, Taylor. One day, you'll have to overcome people like her." Yennecar ultimately won the duel. The only second-year student to defeat a first-year. As a result, she became the center of attention during the joint combat training. Students crowded around her endlessly. The pride of the second years. "You're amazing, Yennecar." And honestly, maybe that was for the best. The busier Yennecar became, the less likely she was to visit Ed's camp again. 2 weeks passed peacefully afterward. Without the main characters interfering in his life, Ed focused entirely on survival. Fishing nets helped him secure enough food. His stats steadily improved. Strength 6. Intelligence 5. Dexterity 9. Will 8. Luck 6. Even his body had started changing from the constant work. Then suddenly, "Do you enjoy walking around half-naked, Ed?" Yennecar had appeared out of nowhere again. Ed immediately sighed. "Why are you even here?" To Yennecar, the hidden forest camp felt like a secret hideout. An adventure. But she had another reason for coming. She wanted advice. During the joint combat training, she had badly injured another student. Even though her opponent broke the rules first by using intermediate-level magic, Yennecar still couldn't stop blaming herself. Her friends constantly comforted her and took her side. But deep down, she knew that didn't erase her own responsibility. So she came to Ed instead. Because unlike everyone else, he didn't blindly agree with her. If you think apologizing is the right thing to do, then do it. That honest answer surprised her. Yenika slowly realized something. Even when Ed pushed people away, it never truly felt malicious. It felt more like he was intentionally creating distance between himself and others. And strangely enough, that gave her peace of mind. I wish everyone in the world was more like you, Ed. The next day, however, Ed realized he was in serious trouble. Sylvania's failed sword master was infamous for its brutal bad endings. Most players never even reached the true ending. And many disasters were triggered by interfering with important events. If you saved a girl during the class assignment exam, Taylor could get assassinated. If you chose the wrong partner during training, Ayla could fall to her death. If you interfered with Yenika's spirit incident, Taylor could literally burn alive. The game punished interference mercilessly, which was why Ed desperately wanted to avoid one specific person. Unfortunately, that person was currently following him. How long are you planning to follow me? The girl simply smiled. I didn't expect you to ignore me this much. Lortel Keyhelland, one of the 4 main heroines. The Golden Daughter. A genius merchant feared by countless players. Also known among fans as the newbie shredder. Then she finally revealed her true purpose. I would like to purchase 2 hours of your time. Ed Rothstein. Unlike the other heroines, Lortel Keyhelland's route was hidden. And unlike Princess Penia, Lortel was treated as a villain from the very beginning. Only much later would players learn the truth behind her actions. The moment you understood her struggles as a realist force to survive in a ruthless world, the game would eventually make you choose between Penia and Lortel. But Ed couldn't afford to get caught up in that right now. If he followed Lortel's pace, he would end up dancing in the palm of her hand. I'd like to help you at least a little. Don't say things you don't mean. Lortel simply smiled. Oh my. I was just trying to show how much respect I have for you. She praised Ed's determination. His refusal to give up despite being disowned and forced to survive in the forest. Then she finally revealed her offer. Let's start with 3 gold coins. I hear you're quite close to Yenika these days. Would you help me befriend her? 3 gold coins. Enough money for some people to survive an entire month. The Golden Daughter truly used money to build connections. But Ed immediately understood her real goal. Sooner or later, Lortel would clash with Princess Penia over control of the academy. She was already gathering allies. Unfortunately, it won't work. Ed refused. If the newbie shredder got involved with Yenika now, there was no telling how badly the future could change. That night, however, Lortel wasn't offended in the slightest. Instead, she approached Yenika herself. After apologizing for the injuries she caused during the joint combat training, she carefully steered the conversation toward Ed. I guess your conversation with Ed didn't work out. Lortel blinked. How do you know that? The spirits are very chatty. They tell me almost everything happening near the northern forest. Then Lortel asked directly. Would you help me befriend him? Yenika smiled awkwardly. I'm touched that you'd spend gold coins trying to befriend me. But sincerity can't be bought with money. What Ed did felt much more genuine. For a moment, Lortel was surprised. She had always viewed Yenika as a naive fairy tale protagonist. But now she realized she was wrong. Yenika understood the darkness of the world perfectly well. She simply chose to remain kind despite it. As Yenika left, she turned back one last time. Oh, and Lortel. I'm sorry about that day. You were hurt pretty badly because of me, right? I hope you recover soon. Lortel watched her leave. She's difficult. Yet something about Yenika seemed different. Perhaps all the expectations people placed upon her weren't entirely a burden after all. Meanwhile, far away in the northern forest, Lucy suddenly stopped. I smell something. Back at camp, Ed had just finished hanging supplies to dry. Then he heard movement nearby. Who's there? A familiar figure emerged from the trees. Belle Maya. A senior maid from Arphilus Hall. The very maid who had thrown him out. I knew you were living here. Lady Yenika speaks of you often, Master Ed. Belle looked around the camp in surprise. I didn't expect you to be living like this. But I'm glad. This change seems to have done you some good. Ed tried listening. Really, He did. But his eyes kept drifting toward the basket she was carrying. The elite maids of Arphilus Hall were masters of cooking and foraging, which meant that basket contained priceless ingredients and knowledge. High-level survival information that couldn't be learned from books. To Ed's surprise, Belle wasn't hostile at all. "You don't need to be so formal with me. You can treat me as poorly as you did back at Arphilus Hall." Belle immediately shook her head. "I don't want to. I can't treat someone poorly when they're working this hard." There was never a Belle Maya route in the game. No important storyline. No hidden quest. Just two background characters getting along. And because of that, there was nothing to worry about. Belle spent hours teaching Ed about edible fruits, herbs, mushrooms, and plants. The results were immediate. Construction completed. Crafting skill increased. New crafted item. Installed fish net for fish farming. Now Ed could keep fish alive for days instead of consuming them immediately. His food supply improved dramatically. His magic improved as well. Ignite reached level 10. Wind/Slash reached level 10. They were only basic spells. But constant use while cooking, chopping wood, and surviving had finally paid off. Soon Ed brewed another new item. Herbal tea. Made from the herbs Belle had taught him about. For the first time since arriving in this world, everything felt stable. Food wasn't a problem. Shelter wasn't a problem. Magic was improving. The sun hadn't even set yet, and all his daily work was already finished. To be honest, Ed was starting to enjoy this life. Then he froze. Wait. What on earth happened to my shelter? The entire place was wrecked. Ed stared at the destruction in horror. Then a single name entered his mind. Lucy. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more epic recaps and overpowered stories. You don't want to miss the next one. See you in the next video. I almost died. Lucy muttered those words while staring at the ruined shelter. What do you mean, you almost died? Ed asked. The world's strongest mage. To whom? Lucy immediately said. Belle Maya. Ed blinked. But she's such a nice person. Apparently, Lucy had skipped class like she always did. But this time Belle Maya had been unusually angry. She started walking toward me with her fist clenched tighter than usual. Lucy shuddered. It looked like it would hurt. Not knowing what else to do, she had escaped using teleportation magic. Then she stared at Ed. So, do you have any more of that jerky? You blew away my entire shelter, you little. Her barrier had disappeared. She had completely run out of mana. Seeing that, Ed finally sighed. Is that right? Then he raised his fist. First, this is for my shelter. And this is for Belle Maya. Ouch. With his home destroyed, Ed came to a simple conclusion. He needed a sturdier house. A proper one. That meant lumber, architectural plans, and a better roof. So he headed to the academy library and spent hours researching. Before he knew it, the library was closing. You study really hard. Ed looked up. A first-year magic department student stood nearby. Elka Island. Oh, has it gotten that late already? Sorry. That's all right. Seeing someone study as hard as you do makes me want to work harder too. She introduced herself. My name is Elka Island. The way she looked at him made it obvious she wanted an introduction too. Ed. Ed Rothstaler. The reaction came instantly. You're Ed Rothstaler? Ed was already used to it. His terrible reputation wasn't going away anytime soon. Yet Elka surprised him. You're very different from the rumors. You read advanced elemental magic books in just a few days. And today alone you finished 6 difficult books. I heard you were a braggart who didn't know anything. I guess rumors really are unreliable. Then she smiled. I know someone who works as hard as you do. I'll be rooting for you. Ed thanked her and prepared to leave. Then suddenly, rumble. The ground shook. And at that moment, Act 1. The final chapter. The battle against Glassken had begun. Hours later, a temporary command post had been established outside the student halls. Many students had survived only because of Taylor's efforts. A massive barrier now surrounded the academic wing. Ayla quickly explained the situation. A summoning circle had appeared. One meant to summon Glassken, the highest-ranking spirit of darkness. There was only one student capable of such a feat. Yennecar Pale Rover, the top second-year student. Everyone suspected that a powerful dark spirit had taken control of her. If Glassken fully manifested, countless students would die. They needed to act before that happened. Taylor stepped forward. The professors and Imperial guards won't arrive in time. We have to handle this from the inside. Not everyone agreed. Clevius immediately objected. You want us to fight through mid-ranking spirits, spirit beasts, 2 berserk high-ranking spirits, and then defeat Yenica herself? That's suicide. The room fell silent. Tarkin, the high fire spirit. Velospa, the high dark spirit. Both were already rampaging inside. Even worse, everyone knew how dangerous dark spirits were. They were natural enemies of elementalists. Powerful beings that corrupted and controlled their summoners. Which meant Yenica was likely being used as nothing more than a vessel. The debate continued. Should they wait until morning? Or act immediately? Ultimately, the decision belonged to one person. Princess Peenia. Everyone waited for her answer. And in that moment, she remembered something Ed had once told her. Whatever burdens I carry cannot be heavier than the weight you carry, princess. Perhaps you should try to take it easy. It was a comforting thought. If only it were possible. After a moment, Peenia finally spoke. We enter the building in 1 hour. However, only Peenia, her knight Claire, the top students of each year, and Class A students would participate. Only those capable enough to survive. I will take full responsibility. The operation began immediately. Students started reporting who were still trapped inside. Audrey Hall was under siege. The magic potion depository was under siege. Then another student suddenly spoke up. I came from the library. There are still 2 people trapped inside. My apprentice librarian friend. And a second-year student. What is your friend's name? Peenia asked. Elka Island. The moment that name was spoken, Zig stood up. Elka. The girl nodded nervously. Why yes. We're both apprentice librarians. Damn it. Ziggs immediately tried to leave. I have to rescue her. Elka can't defend herself. Peenia stopped him. Calm down. We know how important she is to you. But you're one of our strongest fighters. We can't spare you. Another student agreed. Besides, she said there was a second-year student with her. Maybe that person can protect her. Ziggs turned back. What are you hiding? Spit it out. The girl hesitated. Then finally answered. It's Ed Rothstaler. The entire room froze. I'm sorry. That douchebag refused to leave the library after dark. I got annoyed and left Elka there with him. You know what kind of person he is. But Elka never listens to rumors. The room exploded into chaos. Ed Rothstaler? You mean that librarian girl is trapped in there with that lecher? Just the 2 of them? Oh no. Ziggs looked ready to kill someone. Then, unexpectedly, Peenia spoke. How about we trust him anyway? Everyone turned toward her. Meanwhile, Ziggs clenched his fists. If you dare touch even a single hair on Elka's head, I'll turn you into minced meat. And somewhere inside the library, completely unaware of the death threat waiting for him, Ed Rothstaler was about to have a very long night. The past of Ziggs, the spear from nature, was far from ordinary. The saying a dragon rises from a small stream wasn't enough to describe his story. Born in the harsh northern grasslands of the Empire, Ziggs grew up alone. Before he learned to read, he learned how to hunt. Before he knew how to buy food, he learned how to survive from the wilderness. People feared him. He's one of those barbaric nomads. People muttered. I heard he even eats human flesh. But one day, someone spoke to him. What's your name? Ziggs. You look like a wolf walking on 2 legs. It was then he realized how lonely he truly was. Elka and her father welcomed him into their home. Slowly, the young wolf learned how to live as a human. And because of that, he would become a beast again if it meant protecting her. Present day. Rushing into the library, Ziggs found Ed Rothstaler. Where's Elka? Reading room 3. The moment Ziggs saw her safe, relief washed over him. Bookshelves had been moved around her as makeshift barricades. The curtains were closed. Messages had been left behind telling her to stay calm and remain hidden until dawn. Someone had protected her. Then Ziggs noticed the blood. Not Elka's. It belonged to the person who had protected her while ignoring his own injuries. Ed Rothstaler. 3 hours earlier. Ed had already figured it out. The summoning circle meant the Glassken subjugation arc had begun. Soon, berserk spirits would swarm the academy. Rather than getting involved with the main characters, Ed stayed in the library and trained. Since Yenika had summoned countless spirits into physical form, it became the perfect chance to raise his spirit-related skills. His levels rose rapidly. Ignite level 12. Spiritual resonance level 7. Spiritual understanding level 7. Just one more level and he'd be able to form a spirit contract. Unfortunately, he ran out of time. Back in the present, Ziggs looked at the wounded Ed. "What were you doing here?" "Training." Ziggs laughed. But for the first time, he felt like he understood Ed. "I owe you a great debt, Ed Ruffstaler." Ed shook his head. "Go back to the student halls. You shouldn't be here. Go help Taily." Then Ed revealed something shocking. The only one who can damage Tarkin is Taily. With elemental slash. Ziggs froze. He had never even spoken to Taily before. Then it hit Ed. In the original story, Ziggs and Taily became friends during the end-of-semester evaluation. But that event hadn't happened yet. The final chapter had started an entire month early. Which meant Ziggs wasn't friends with Taily. Taily hadn't learned elemental slash. And without that attack, nobody could hurt Tarkin. The story was already falling apart. Student Square, Attack Unit Post. Ziggs returned to the others. Princess Peenia and the attack unit had already attempted to infiltrate the building. They failed. Claire was badly injured. Clevius was wounded. The situation was getting worse. The summoning circle continued to progress. Glaskin's arrival was drawing closer. "What do we do?" someone asked. There wasn't enough time. Peenia looked at the exhausted group. If they focused only on Tarkin, Glaskan would still be summoned. A decision had to be made. Then Ed stepped forward. This was the last thing he wanted. The last thing he had tried to avoid. Getting involved in the story itself. But there was no choice anymore. "We'll divide our forces into two groups." Everyone turned toward him. Ed took a breath. "I will lead one of them." Because whether he liked it or not, he had finally become part of the story.